All right. Just going to do a couple things here and make sure that everything is set up, but let's get this live stream started. Yeah, just going live, let people join in, make sure that the live chat is working properly. Yeah. Now it's my face. Just need to get into the Creator Studio so I can see people in the chat. But we'll be going here any second. There we go. Now I see someone. Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm not sure how late the delay is, but I see some people in the live chat. Just wave my hand here and let's see how long it takes. Going. I think it's about 15 seconds. A little longer than 50 seconds. Yeah, so just so you guys are aware, it's going to take a little bit for, or at least from my perspective, or I guess from your perspective, for me to answer your questions because the live chat is live, but I'm a good deal ways behind, or I guess ahead, in the live stream. So don't let that keep you from asking from questions. I'm absolutely, it's going to feel like I'm moving on. Do not let that stop you from asking questions. I will stop. I will answer the questions because I know that there is a delay, and I want to make sure that there's no real difference in terms of being able to address you guys, even though it's here on a live stream as opposed to in person. Just finish getting set up. All right, we will save this for later. Hey everyone in the chat. Good evening, community. Hi, Woot. I see you guys. All right. So, let's get started. First things first, we are a week and a half away from, well, yeah, we're a week and a half away from Florida PyCon, happening on October 7th, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with a bar crawl or a bar slither, haha, Python, afterwards. We have some amazing speakers. They are now all available on the website. We're about to get the session on the actual schedule onto the website as well. That is available at flpy.org. You can find all of your information there, including links to get your tickets. We are actually starting to run out of space, and we actually have a free ticket raffle for people who are watching the live stream, and I'm going to post that into the live chat right now in a second. Let's see. So anyone who's on the live stream, and I know that we will have people filtering in as the live stream is going on. Anyone who fills out this form will be entered to win one of 2 free PyCon tickets. And at the end of the live stream, I'm going to post a discount code that will cut the current ticket price in half from, I think it's $80 right now, down to $40. So definitely stick around till the end, in addition to all of the amazing knowledge. Let me just get this. I'm doing this on 2 different computers. My famous singing for anyone who has been to our meetups. All right. There we go. Perfect. Okay, now into the Creative Studio. I should have had this set up just before. Nearly there, nearly there. Here we are. All right, there's my live chat. All right, there we go. Yes, so there's a link to the Google form. And I know people who are watching the time delay, it just magically popped up while I was still not quite sure how to get it, but that's time delay. So yes, anyone who goes to that form, fills it out. We have 2 free tickets to give away to PyCon at the end of the stream, and once again, at the end of the stream, we will also post a discount code into the chat. All right. Yes, for 50% off. Let's see. Anything else to go with PyCon other than it's amazing? Yeah. So once again, October 7th from 8 a.m. 5 p.m. have amazing speakers. More details at flpy.org. All right, moving on to the next little bit of housekeeping before we start coding. This is unusual, for sure. This is the first all virtual meetup that we have done. So for everyone who's currently watching right now, thank you so much. I know this is a little bit different, but I wanted to thank the Iron Yard. A couple months ago, the home office for the Iron Yard decided that they were going to close up shop. They were going to shut down all of their branches, including the one here in Orlando that has hosted the Orlando Python user group for at least the last 2 years, last 3 years. And I really cannot thank them enough for having hosted us, for the managers that we've worked with there, the students who I know, we've had a couple who graduated from the Iron Yard, continue to come to the meetings. My co-organizer, Devin Castell, was a graduate and has really helped. I joined when we decided to take it over, but yeah, we're all really sad to see the Iron Yard go. And again, eternal gratitude for having hosted us. That being said, starting next month for our October meetup, the Orlando Python user group will begin meeting at the Melrose Center at the Downtown Public Library in Orlando. The times are going to be a little bit different because we get kicked out a little early. We'll either start at 6 or 6:15 and go up until 7:45 when they start shutting down the space. If you any feedback that you guys can give me, I'll gladly take it as to what starting time is better. I know not everyone can make 6 o'clock, and it probably will depend a lot on how or what the content is for that particular meeting. But we won't be able to meet for the 2.5 hour stretches that we have done in the past for certain topics. And again, that will start next month, and we're really glad to be to join Orlando IoT, Robotics and Makers, the .NET user group in using the space, and a couple of other meetups, community meetups as well in the Melrose Center. All right. With that, we'll begin. So, this is part 3 of 3 of our Learn to Python beginner series. In the first one, we started by opening up the interactive prompt, the Python shell, getting used to working with variables, the different types, collections like lists and dictionaries, and tuples, and a couple of if statements, for loops, things like that. In part 2, we looked at functions, a lot of class, information about classes, and creating our own files and running them. In part 3, we're going to look at using packages in the standard library and some third-party libraries and how to install them, and just kind of give a little bit of an overview on some of the popular and really useful ones. So the first thing we're going to look at are some standard library packages, some really useful ones. We've already, I believe we already looked at one because we imported something for classes, I believe. So I'm using VS Code, so I'm just going to open up my VS Code text editor in the desktop so we can start working. All right. And let's go from the camera to our mirror cam here. Great. Yeah, so I use VS Code as my editor. We've seen that in the previous 2 streams, and I just opened up to a folder. If Well, we're going to start creating some files here. I don't think that we're going to do some importing from other files that we have, but you never know because this is live coding. Yay! But just going to open up a new Python file, and it's going to quickly save this one here. I'm just going to call it standard lib, example, and .py. So we start getting our Python syntax here. I'll go ahead and make that full screen. And a little bit larger for the string. There we go. So there are a ton of standard lib packages. I'm actually we're going to wait on the code. We're going to go into the documentation here. Python standard library. So we can see some things that every single Python distribution, whenever you install Python, you get all of this for free. You don't have to install anything else. So we already went through going through all of our different types and our loops, functions, classes. We have already gone through our built-in functions. We use some constants. We went through our types, the different comparators, numbers, our collections, strings. We didn't go through bytes. We didn't go through everything, but we gave it a nice overview. There are exception classes for dealing with errors in the code. Now, here's where we start with the standard library. These are all the names of packages that come pre-installed with Python, and you have to import them, just like we did with our in the previous session, where we created a main in one file and then imported it into another, and then ran it. So things that you will use a lot, I use these a ton. String, tons of really useful string operations. Regular expressions, use that a ton. A couple, every once in a while when you're using byte information, you'll use struct. DateTime, use a ton. Calendar, use a ton. Collections, use a ton. These are some really useful ones. Some things in arrays, some things in type. Copy is actually really good if you need to make an exact copy of an object because you want to do comparison, or you want to change something but not change the original object. If you just do b equals some object and then c equals b, you're not actually copying the object. You're just setting a reference to it. So whenever you go to change C, you're actually also changing B because it's the same thing. Copy allows you to make a copy and a deep copy, so that you know that when I make a copy of something, the original is not going to be affected. So that's a really good one. Pretty printer. You sometimes will use it. It highly depends on what you're using, but if you want something that looks a little better than a standard print statement, pretty print is the way to go. And then enum, because Python technically doesn't have a native enum type, so it's a standard library. Numbers you use a lot. Math you'll probably also use a ton. Decimal, if you need to have better precision. With your floating point, arithmetic. Random, you will also use a ton. Iter tools, I use a ton. Func tools, a little less. So here's actually a big one. OS and os.path are huge libraries. Whenever you want to use Python to run something on the command line or check if a path exists, if it's a file, if it's a directory, if you want to create a directory, you'll use os and os.path. So use that a ton. Temp file, not so much. Sometimes it depends. You can also get very similar functionality just by putting in the root tmp directory, at least on Linux and Mac. Windows, I think Windows also does a root TEMP. Glob, uh, Glob, you will probably use a lot if you need to do any kind of batch processing, because you can use Glob with like you're typing into a bash script with your not ampersand, but your star, so you can get every file in a directory that ends with JPEG or starts with my awesome file star.json. So Glob is really useful. shutil, honestly, what I use shutil most of all is just saying I want the directory gone and I don't care what's in it, just get rid of it. Shutil will do that. High-level file operations. Pickled is really nice, especially when you need to save code. So Python, well, I'm not, I guess it's just a P, but pickling is the Python way of taking your exact object at that point in code, turning it into, well, converting the actual bytes of that object, that representation, into a file so that when you load it back in later, it's the exact same as it was when you saved it. It's great for saving class objects or models that don't have, like machine learning models that don't have a way to export them as a standard file. That's really useful. Oh, and SQLite 3. SQLite is the only SQL library to be included in the standard library. You have you can do PsychoPG2 for Postgres. MySQL, I think it's just MySQL. You can even do SQL Server. And the nice thing about all of the Python SQL libraries is they all have the same API. So if you decide that I have created this application in proof of concept with SQLite 3, and I'm now ready to move my database off-site over to Postgres. Well, all you do is just, instead of importing SQLite 3, you just import PsychoPG2, and all of your code is still identical. You don't have to change it. It's wonderful. Data compression. It's pretty self-explanatory. gzip, tars, all of that. File formats, CSV is really good if you don't want to use something like pandas or just reading in the lines themselves, because CSV does a lot of the more, not esoteric, but just really infrequently encountered things for you, so you don't have to tear your hair out. Hashlib. Hashlib is great when you need any kind of encryption, or if you just need to create a really long random bit of text. That's what Hashlib is for. Here we go. OS, miscellaneous operating system interfaces. So os.path is a submodule of OS. You'll find tons of stuff in OS. It's really useful, all the stuff that I mentioned before. I/O, typically you won't have to work with this directly, but you can. Time, if you don't need anything out of DateTime, you can just get it. Well, if you don't actually need the dates, you can just go to time. Argparse for creating command line utilities, but I'm actually going to show you a third-party library that does all of that for you. It's great. So logging, secured password input for your programs. C-types, if you really need to get a little bit under Python and do some C converting. And then here we get into some of the really crazy ones. There's these are all dealing with multithreading. And then we actually have, as of 3.5, async IO and a bunch of async libraries. I still don't understand them. I should at some point. But this is becoming a little more ingrained in Python. Socket, low, if you need a persistent open connection, if you've ever worked with Socket IO, Python has that natively in here for program-to-program and low-level network communications. If you just need to do web communications, there's a different, well, actually, here we go. There's a library called URL-lib, which is going to be in here. Data handling. If you need to do any kind of MIME parsing, email is the way to go. I'm actually going to show you a little bit of JSON because JSON is very useful. So Python, JSON is one of the only very popular data types that has native support in Python, native inclusion. YAML and XML have, well, XML is a little bit weirder. Some of the ones that you actually want to use, like, yeah, so here, XML parsing modules, that's in there. But you actually will get better support for XML and HTML parsing from third-party libraries in Python. JSON, if you're reading JSON, there's no need to install a third-party library because JSON just does it beautifully automatically because any valid, other than null to none, and then capitalizing true and false, JSON code is valid Python code. Other than those two things, is you can copy paste from a JSON object into Python code, and it works. It's wonderful. But again, that's included in the standard library. And here's all of these XMLs. If you really want to do your own XML parsing, etree, element tree is going to be the easiest way for you to do it, unless you have some more specific use cases. Internet protocols, here's URL-lib. URL-lib, it's the basics. It's what other libraries build on, but you most likely will just use other libraries. And I'll show you that when we get to our third party as well, because there's a great library called Requests that makes HTTP requests really easy, and RESTful APIs really easy. Multimedia services, audio. I personally don't haven't used these a whole lot. Actually, I have done audio operations. That was a while ago. Let's see, get text. If you are creating something that you know is going to have multi-language support, get text is the standard way of doing that. Turtle. Turtle. If you're not familiar with Turtle, you get a screen and you have this little arrow and you say lay something down, go this way, turn right, go this way, things like that. Drawing. It's usually an intro to programming sort of thing. tkinter is the super low level Python graphics library. You almost never ever will actually use tkinter directly. You'll almost always be using something like Pygame on top of it that does all of the crazy headache inducing things for you. Unit test you'll use occasionally directly, but typically you'll use it in other testing frameworks like PyTest. I'm not going to show it off, but that's the unit test is the main driver for testing, application testing in Python. Stack trace for debugging when you get errors. VM for virtual environments. Disutils for creating your own third-party packages. Sys for things like sys.exit if you need to exit early. System-specific runtime functions, you'll find them in there. Context lib, utilities with statements. I gave a talk on that either earlier this year or last year, but it's just one of the best things in context lib is treating functions as though they are creatable classes for use with statements. Let's see, we're almost through, but you do get a lot. And again, this is all comes whenever you install Python in the standard library. Parser for generic parsing of parse trees, as it has right there. Keywords, tokenization. What else do we have? Some Windows-specific functions there as well. Terminal control, TTY, crypts. Password database. Yeah, I think that does it. Yeah, so all of these libraries, every one of these points is a library that you can import and you don't have to install because it's already on your machine. So with that, let's go ahead and let's pull out our first one. Let me remind myself what I was going to pull out. Let's see. Well, I can give a brief overview on DateTime. DateTime is a really useful one. If you're working with data or you're working with logs, DateTime is a really good one to know. So when we're in our file here, actually, I don't even need the file yet. I'm just going to open up Python interpreter. So Python 3.6, import DateTime, and make sure that import is spelled correctly. All right. So now, if we want to know what time it is right now, is DateTime dot, well, actually it's DateTime.DateTime.now, because DateTime is actually a class inside of DateTime. Or yeah. So now, oh, I didn't even include. This is what happens. There we go. So I have a DateTime object with the year, month, day, 24-hour, minute, second, microsecond, or well, decimal seconds. I can also it's good to know when you do now, it is whatever the time currently is according to the locale that the code is running on. Typically, whenever you're doing things like you're going to run it on a server, we're programmers. We like UTC. So UTC now. UTC, Greenwich Mean Time. We really like UTC unless you are displaying something to a user, or if you never ever are going to need to have compatibility across time zones. So that's now. Let's see. You can use the DateTime library to parse time strings or to export as time strings. If you need to do things like future checks, they also have a time delta class. So if we have this now object here, if we wanted to say do now, or if we want to check how many, I'm going to keep checking something until it is 6 hours from the start of this program execution. Well, the first thing I would do is, okay, the program started at whenever I create my now variable, and I can say that my end time, whenever I want the loop to stop, is going to happen at now plus a time delta of 6 hours. So now if I go in and check my end, you'll see that it looped over 24, and when it gets to 2017, 9, 27, 1 in the morning, 32, so on, it would, this is now 6 hours in the future. We can do, instead of hours, we could do milliseconds. We could do year. Any of the fields here are we can include in this time delta. We can also, instead of adding, we can minus, or we can plus a negative number, and now it's 6 hours in the past. So, very quick look at DateTime. Let's look at another library. Let's see. Yeah, so string re collections. Let's see. Let's actually take a very quick look at Glob, maybe? So, we're going to look at, we're going to import, actually, let me clear this. I don't even remember if this is, no, never mind. I'll just do this. There we go. So, from Glob, import Glob. And with this, we can use Glob to say, I want you to go to, so this is currently running in my desktop, so if I go up one level, and I'm on a Mac by the way, if I go up one level, I am in my user's root, and I can ask for all of the hidden files and folders. Now if you're not familiar, most operating systems, if you start the file name or folder name with a period, it doesn't show up in your Finder window, like here. We see only things that, applications, downloads, all these kind of things, VS projects, here's my Anaconda, scikit-learn data, things like that. But if I go ahead and say, give me all of the files, this is our wildcard here, all the files that start with period, which means they're hidden, look at all of these things. Look at all of these. There is a hidden Pebble folder. I was doing Pebble development. Here's my Bash profile. There's a hidden Conda folder, an AstroPy folder, npm, Keras, all these different things. And I forget if I can just go into, let's see, Finder, Preferences, wondering, fill, tags, sidebar, advanced. No, there's a different way of actually showing everything. What if I go in here? So I'm currently in my root. There we go. So this is listing everything that, so actually we can use ls to see the same kind of thing. At least on a Mac, when you list all the things in a directory, it will show you just like it shows you up here. But then if we say list everything, here's all of these different files and folders that are hidden from our view because they start with a period. And same thing here. We just say, give me everything that starts with a period in the folder directly above, and it returns a list of all of them. So if I just want to see how many I had, I can do len of glob of upper directory, starts there, wildcard. I have 70 hidden items in my user root. All right, so there's glob. And then you can imagine doing like four file path in glob thing, do something to this file, load this file, things like that. So that's very useful. Okay. So let's actually just do a very quick look at, clear. Then we're going to load PyCon again. So I'm just going to go ahead and import OS, and let's actually take a look at everything in OS. Remember that dir will list everything available to us in either a well, an object, because in Python, everything is an object, including imports. So here's everything that we get in OS, and it's a lot. I'm just trying to look for something familiar. Replace, here's remove dir. If I go up to the M, there's our make dir, or make dirs, make multiple directories. Let's see, we can do regular write, os.wait, although typically we use the time module for that. Let's see, chmod, yeah, here's our chmod, change dir, all of that is in here. And I'm actually going to go ahead and quit and then just run that again. So back in here, going to do import os.path as path, so it's just a tiny bit shorter. But this is something that we can use to see if files exist. So path dot, well, let's actually do our dir on this as well. So we can get the absolute path, base name, the current directory. If it's a link, is it a file, is it a directory? All sorts of things like that. Here, just a second. All right. All right. So, join, you'll use a lot. One of the reasons that you will find yourself using path most is if you are working with files and you know that your code is going to be running on on Windows and a Unix system, because you can't just you shouldn't really just kind of do this directly in your code, because Windows is expecting that. Because Windows, because they decided to use the different, right. So one way that we can plan for this is doing, and remember this, if you just import OS, it's os.path.join or whatever, but for us, we're just going to do path. Path.join, and this is running on a Mac, so it's going to have the backslashes, but if I ran the same thing on Windows, it would put that in. We can give it a list of, file.jpg. Oh, nope. See, I did it too. There we go. So, and this actually takes a collection, so either a list or a tuple. So it will just say, what operating system am I running on? And then here are all these different strings. I'm just going to, not tuple, oh, never mind, I was right the first time. There we go. So it's all, so it just takes n number of arguments and then just puts them together based on the file that you're working on, or that you're looking for. If we want to just say, wherever my code is currently running, I know there's a folder here and with a file in it that I'm trying to get to, and I don't know where I'm running, but I definitely want to have it going from the root of the computer, so I have the absolute path. So what we can do there is, let's see, I think I need to import OS just directly, and then we can do, I'm just going to do os.path.join, and the beginning of that is os.get current working directory, CWD, which is a function. And then if we are going to go down into, say, a data folder, and we want to grab a file, mypicture.jpg. then it would create our absolute path so that we could guarantee that wherever this is currently running, it's going to go exactly to that file. It's not going to do something crazy because it's in a weird folder that we didn't account for as a developer. So again, yeah, there's tons of stuff in OS and path. Well, actually, let's do another one. os.path.isFile, and this is, I don't have, well, it's looking in the desktop because that's the current working directory, as we see here. And we just created this standard lit example Python, which we're probably not going to end up actually using. But I can check to see if it's a file, and it is. And if I change this to, I think it is dir, it's not a directory, it's a file, so that returns false. All right. Want to see if there's one more that, one really good one that I want to show off. If not, I'm just, well, I'll pull up JSON because that actually shows off a good Python convention. Yeah, let's take a look at some JSON. So, go ahead and clear this again. Now, in Python, if you remember, we had our dictionary, and we could say name equals Michael, and or let's actually use something different. Age 26 because integer. Let's mix up our types because we can do that. So here's our dictionary, and dictionaries are allowable types in JSON. Now, JSON, well, we can't create a class and export it as JSON, but we can do that with strings, booleans, none type objects with none or null in other languages, strings, floats, ints, nulls, booleans, lists, and dictionaries. Those are all the valid types that we can use in JSON. And so as long as the data that we want to export, hi Stacy, I see you there. As long as that's the data that we want to export, we can simply import JSON, and then we can do JSON.dump, which is, we give it the object that we want to dump, and then we open the file that we want to write it out to. Python, we use open to create, either create by writing to or reading from file objects. So I'm going to create this file.json, and I'm going to open up with, so that this W means that we're going to write to it, A is append, the default is R, which is read, which we're obviously not doing. And you can also double up, like we're going to read it in binary mode, or we're going to write it in binary mode. If you're writing images directly, you would actually do write binary and then export the binary data. But we're just writing it. So if we go ahead and run this, we now have Michael.json here. And if I just kind of format the document and make it look pretty, hey, look, it's magical JSON. Woohoo! So it just changed a couple things, like it made these double quotes because that's the typical thing. Actually, let me go ahead and expand this just a little bit. I'm going to, let's use some Python syntax. So if we were doing kind of like a business record, I'm employed, And let's see, something I can put none. I don't have any houses, so maybe that's just kind of like an empty list, or we could just say like a list of houses or properties or whatever. Let's say houses. I'm not fishing for anything, and that's just none. So if we go ahead and redump our object, you'll notice that this is still a string. This is still an integer. It took our capitalized Boolean because Python and converted it to the JSON lowercase true, just like it is in JavaScript. And it turned our none into null, also just like it is JavaScript. JSON is JavaScript object notation. So it will do that conversion for us. Then reading it back in, we can do new data equals JSON.load, and we'll just bring in this right there, and it's already in read mode, so this is redundant, we don't need it. And we go ahead and look at new data. There's our data. Loaded, saved it out, loaded it back in. The nice thing is other data interfacing libraries like CSV also use this load, this dump, load, and there's also syntax API, which makes working with loading and saving data really easy. One other thing I'll show you, there's also loads, load s and dump s. So if instead I go to which will take the object and just dump it into a string. So if I do json.dump_s dumps d, this is now just a string. We didn't write it out, it just converted it to a string. So you can use dump s if, say, for building a web API that returns JSON information. Other frameworks typically have something called JSONify that will do it for you, but if you just want to do it yourself, there's dump s. And just to show you that it can also do it the other way around, we can do load s, and this will just cancel each other out. Boom, it's still our original data. So that's JSON. And I think that's... Oh, and I'll just do one more little bonus, because this is really nice and quick. So there's the time library. So from time import sleep, and then we can just tell our program to sleep for 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. So that's how you can do delays in your code. Like if you sent off a job, or if you want to create a text game or something, or just anything where you need it to sleep, like check the status of something. If it's not done yet, sleep for a second and then check it again. That's how you can do that. All right. So that's it for the standard libraries that I'm going to show off here. If you have any questions, put it in the live chat. It will take a little bit for me to see them, so I'm just going to continue. But again, don't be afraid to ask them. All right. So I'm going to clear this again. Now we're going to look at some third-party libraries. Unlike the standard library, I can't give you a comprehensive list of the third-party libraries because there's just so many. Most of the third-party libraries that you are going to interface with are available on PyPI, the Python package index, pypi.python.org. There are currently 117,895 packages listed on PyPI. That great. Okay, no questions so far. Good. We're going to continue. Already doing so. That's a lot of packages. And these are some of the most recently updated ones. I'm probably not going to see anything that I recognize. Oh, I do actually. Pippin. That just surprised me. So Pippin is one of these up and coming kind of projects that attempts to combine your requirements files with a virtual environment, so you only have to worry about one thing. It's pretty cool. It's up and coming. I was just surprised that I saw something on there. Yeah, you never know. But we go ahead and search for the first library that I'm going to show off for you guys. It's a library called Begins. Now, Begins command line programs for lazy humans, because as programmers we don't like working. That's why you get into programming, because you don't want to work, and then you end up working to not work. It's perfect. But it makes command line it makes building command line interfaces really easy. There's the argparse library that I mentioned while going through the standard library. This basically is a layer on top of that, so you don't have to worry about it. It makes it really easy. I also showed it off sometime last year because it uses function annotations, which were introduced in Python, 3.3. I think they were just introduced, or whatever. They use a feature in Python 3 called function annotations, which I really like because they improve code readability. So we have this third-party library. How do we get it onto our machine? Well, when you install Python, if you are on Linux and you just did apt install Python or Python 3, it may or may not have come with it. But there's a tool called pip. PIP is what we use to install third-party libraries from PyPI, which is the default, or from other libraries, depending on where we tell it to download it from, because you can also give it a URL. So if you go to instead of typing in Python, and actually let me go back to VS Code for this because it's bigger. On your command line, instead of Python, do pip. And most of the time, you'll just end up using pip install, pip uninstall, and pip list to see what's available. I have a ton of Python packages installed currently, or not installed. What am I saying? So I want to do pip list. I have a lot. So it will give you a list of all of the currently installed Python packages and their version number. Now, if you don't have pip and you're on a Linux system, you'd want to do apt install Python 3 if you need to, pip. If you just do the graphical installation of Python on your machine, pip is probably already installed. And if you, to install a third-party library, all we need to do is do pip install and then the name of it as it appears on PyPI. Pip install begins. Now, I already have pip installed, so requirement already satisfied, begins, and it lists where it is. If I want, I can do -U to update it to the latest version. Pip is business sensitive, sensitive to keeping things legacy and not breaking things. So you have to explicitly say, yes, I want to upgrade this this package. Well, and it's already up to date. What kind of package can I think of that is almost certainly not up to date? Let's see. Well, PyYAML is almost certainly not up to date. It is up to date. Goodness, what can I think of? Well, let's just look in here. You know, I bet Zappa is not up to date because that's something current that's getting a lot of updates. There we go. So when you install something, you'll actually see it install both. Well, it will download all the library that you requested, the package that you requested, and then all of its requirements, all of its dependencies, and it does it automatically for you. You don't have to worry about it. You just say, I just want to install this, and it does. There we go. All right. So, again, pip install begins. Now, begins is actually a little weird in that the name that we use to import it is not the same as this package name. This is rarely ever the case, but it is for begins. So instead of begins, it's just begin when using in code. Again, you know, not usual, but it is here. Now let me get my syntax here. So I'm just going to call this CLI.py. Now, let's say, let's actually import the math. We'll import math on this. Now, typically, you don't always see this. You seldom actually see this, but personally, I like to install standard library packages before third-party packages, and then import those before I import anything from the application that I am currently working on, like a submodule, things like that. But that's just me. But let's go ahead and we'll import math, and we'll import our CLI. Now we can let's create a function here that that's something math does. Takes the square root of a given number. So we're just going to call this run square root on a number. And so Python 3, this is a function annotation. So we're just gonna say it takes an integer and it's going to return float. And these are just function annotations. At this point, it's really just for readability's sake. So we can do return math dot square root. Oh, and just to kind of give you guys a little, we have sine and tan and all sorts. There's all sorts of really good stuff in there. But we're just going to take the we're going to return the square root of a number, and just to guarantee that it is a float, we're just going to cast it to a float. All right. So in code, if we were just if we have this being a separate file, and we want to well, just to show that it works. I'm in my desktop, this CLI.py is in the desktop, so I can just go ahead and do import CLI. It sees that there's a file called CLI and imports it, and I'm just going to test run square root on 4, should give me CLI dot run square root. There we go, 2.0. So 4. So 4 square root of 4 is 2, and then we cast, which it might have returned an integer, who knows? And then we just guarantee that it's a float because we said we were going to return a float. So be true to our word, 2.0. Square root of 13. Square root of 10 to the 20. You get the idea. So let's say we wanted to turn this run square root function into a command line utility. The way that we do that with begins, or begin in this case, is we just do, we use a decorator @ begin.start. Actually, before we get to that, let me show you the old way of what we used to do this. We would do something if name equals main, and then we do some kind of crazy arg parse, and then we would run square root on it. You get the idea. This is terrible, but it is the standard no third-party library way of saying that when I run this function, or when I run this file, run something in the file, but not if I import it into another program. But what begins allows us to do is, in addition to that, it adds a lot of stuff on top. So again, kind of going back here, we can do @begin.start, and it and then these we actually just give. Well, let's actually see if it likes this. We can give it a float, or well, let's do this. So an integer. So our type annotations, we are now just putting in description strings. So num is an integer, and the output is the square root of num, or the given number. And also, we also looked at this last time, but we can also put doc strings in here. Returns the square root of a given number. So, in addition to this being probably at this point overly readable, I don't think anyone would look at this and wondering what the heck does this do? What the heck does this do? We can still go ahead and go into Python. We import our file here, and everything still works. But what we can also do is instead of going into run cli.py, what if we didn't use begins? We don't actually have anything here in here that runs, but because we did begins, it actually builds our command line interface for us. So we can give it -h for a help string, and it automatically builds this for us. It is a real time saver. So positional arguments, num. We can give it for. Oh, this is me. Let's see. I forgot something. So whenever we do this, unless it is a Boolean, and the way that we specify something like this, we give it a default value of false, and it just becomes a command line flag. Everything that it reads in is a string. So what we can do is we can do begin dot. Let me get my spacing here right. Utils dot. No, that's two bool. Never mind, I was thinking something crazy. There are two utilities in here. It will do automatic list parsing for a given delimiter, and it will also convert a bunch of different things into booleans, like yes, just y, 0 and 1, things like that. But here, it's a list. Normally we would do some kind of type checking, but here I'm just going to go ahead and cast the string num to an integer and then run it through. So who's filled out the form? Because we are watching. All right. So if we go ahead and run this again, now that I'm converting string to an integer, well, it didn't do anything. So here we're just returning. What we'd actually do, we'd actually just kind of like to print it. So let's say out equals, here's our answer. We'll go ahead and print it, and then to retain compatibility for programs that are importing it, we'll still return it. There we go. So this has now become a command line utility. And once again, just kind of showing off, it builds our friendly help documentation automatically, just based on the doc string, the parameters, and their associated annotations. I use this all the time. It's amazing. So let's go to another thing. I mentioned urllib earlier, specifically urllib3, which is in the standard library. That is the included way to make HTTP requests to web services. And you absolutely can use it. However, there is a much easier, less hair-pulling way of doing so with much less code. And it is using a library called requests. So if I'm just going to look for Python requests, Google search, there we go. So this is the actual documentation for requests. So normally what would be a very crazy multi-line thing with urllib is we want to make a GET request to a URL, and then we can pass in some other things like authentication tokens, params, data payload, header information, things like that. So we pip install requests, and just for my part, I'm going to make sure it's up to date. Yep, and there's everything. So clear it once again, open Python, and we're going to import requests. Waha. Now, we can do this to any service. I'm actually going to use my own just because I remember the API offhand, and returns JSON. So to show you guys that, I'm going to say get the response for making something at requests. I'm going to make a GET request. Oh, and by the way, there's we can also do post, put. It's either del or delete. I don't quite remember which one offhand. Any kind of any of the REST APIs, REST API methods. But I'm gonna make a GET request to https://adwx.rest, which is my own service, API metar, and then KMCO, which is Orlando International. Boom. So I now have a response object, and we can quickly look. Oh, so we have a winner. So the first, our first winner is Vladimir for a free PyCon ticket. Congratulations, Vladimir. And it's going to take a second for it to pop up. But go ahead and email me at orlando.mlds@gmail.com. I'll go ahead and type that in the chat. and we'll go ahead and email you the code so you can get your free ticket. So Orlando.mlds at no, I don't. There we go. So, yep. Congratulations, Vladimir. Go ahead and email us there, and we will. You're going to PyCon. We have one more to give away, and while we are at it, I'm going to go ahead and put the discount code into the live chat as well. Well, let me actually spell it correctly. And also the spelling, or the capitalization. There we go. So, there we go. The first 10 people who use the discount code will get 50% off of the current price for a $40 Florida PyCon ticket, again happening on October 7th in a week and a half. All right, so yeah, again, congratulations, Vladimir. Coming to PyCon for free. We have one more to give away during the stream, and that will be towards the end. All right. So, in case it needs to be said, if you're watching the stream, don't use the code just yet because we still have one more to give away. Okay? So, continuing with requests. So, we have this response object, and let's go ahead and take a look at everything in it. Specifically, we can close the response, we can grab the headers, any cookies that we were sent. Is it a redirection? Were we redirected? Typically, you'll get either raw, you'll pull the text out of it. But if you also know that it's just going to be, I was thinking we were going to wait until the end, but second winner is Francisco. So congratulations, Vladimir and Francisco. Both go ahead and email us at orlando.mlds@gmail.com. It's posted. We have free tickets for you. And I'm just going, so Vladimir Sanchez and Francisco Mendez. Congratulations. Now, now we'll continue. All right. So we have a response object, and I personally know that we return JSON, so we can just load in the load the JSON. But just to show you, we can do resp.text, and this is the text response that we got. So if it's going to return a status code, well, a status code is something different. If it's just returning raw text, you just get out of text. However, we can say data equals response.json, which is a function to parse the text. And then there's our data. It's parsed because we were getting JSON from it. Let's see. Quick other little thing. If you want to send parameters, you can do it the parameterized including it with the question mark, the equal sign, and then whatever options, or well, not whatever options, that's specifically for this API. Actually, I'm going to do format equals YAML. I think that was the one I had. So we can do, well, and then I'll just print out the text. Oh, well, I actually just overwrote resp. So this is it in YAML format. However, if we can also supply either header information, payload, by giving them as arguments in our request. So I can say, actually this is a dictionary format, and let's just say I want XML back in this one. And there it is using a parameter. So we can create a parameter dictionary or a header dictionary, and then supply it as an argument as opposed to embedding it in the URL string. So don't tear your hair out. Use requests. It makes your life that much easier when you are requesting data from the web. All right. So that's making command line interfaces and requesting information from the web. Let's actually take a look at how we can make an actual web application. Now, I'm not going to go so terribly crazy into it, but just to give a brief overview, get something up and running. So there are oh, wrong one. I'm already out. Clear. So, again, any questions? Type in chat. If there's something you really want to see in a library that I cover that I don't do, let me know. I'll go back and either look it up and demo it for you guys, or answer any kind of questions. So there was requests. There are a ton of web frameworks for Python. However, when it comes to the most popular and best supported, there really are. There's really three. There really are three, maybe four, depending on depending. The biggest one, both in size and usage, is Django, spelled just like DJANGO. Django, the web framework for perfectionists with deadlines, because this is a batteries included framework, web framework. If you're familiar with Ruby on Rails and you want to make the jump to Python, Django is going to be coziest for you because it is batteries included. It includes everything when you install it. It's very heavy but very dev friendly. Let's see if they have a Django at a glance. There we go. So models, class. I'm wondering. This is. I was hoping they had something small. It's been a while since I've touched Django. But this is going to Django is the kind of web framework that you will use if you want to create a database-driven web project, and you want to include everything in one install. Just it's all there. Django has it for you. There's so that's Django. That's the granddaddy, batteries included one. There's a handful of the two biggest of what we call micro frameworks are Flask and Bottle. We're actually going to take a look at Flask. So I'm just going to pull up Bottle first. and let's increase the size. So this is all of the code that you need from Bottle to actually get something up and running. So we import route run template, templating. Will build it, build your little web page for you. You'll see this kind of route syntax a lot, where here's the endpoint that we want to go to, hello, and then it actually takes this, and whatever text is given here is given to the same named parameter in the function, and then this one is just saying hello, name equals name. That's the templating engine, and then running it. It's going to run locally on port 8080, and then if you go to the same kind of thing, it will say hello world. Ta-da! Very simple. It's a microframe. It's called a microframework because it gives you the, for the most part, the bare bones of what you need. Oh yeah, it gives you the bare bones of what you need, and then you continue to add other modules onto it to build the minimum of what you want to make. Yes, Vladimir, there was, so Instagram is, so the Instagram application itself, from the web application to the back end, because again, is Django. Instagram is Django. If you want proof that Django can scale, look at Instagram. Yeah, it scales, and it is all inclusive. There's a great talk at PyCon this year. Instagram devs from Instagram actually gave a keynote presentation on their migration from Python 2.7 to 3.5 with the eventual move to 3.6, and how they were able to do it module by module, no downtime, no slowdowns, and developed all on a single master branch. That last one is scary, and all of that. Yeah, Django does not use branches. Everyone commits to master. Insane. But they were able to do it. And so I highly recommend going to watch that keynote. It's available on YouTube, and they almost certainly have it listed on their site. That's National US PyCon. And it was, if you want to narrow it down a little bit more, it was at Portland this year. So thank you, Vladimir. Okay, so that's Bottle. So we're going to pull up Flask. Flask also has a lovely little tiny interface. And it also comes with a lovely little command line utility. So I'm actually going to go ahead and copy this and then just go move on over into our code here. So I'm going to create let's say it's flaskapp.py. All right. So there's that. Again, pip install Flask, and I'm going, because it's me, I'm going to include -u to make sure it's up to date. There we go. So we now have Flask, and the basic install of Flask includes the routing engine, the Jinja templating engine, and that's really it. That's really all it includes. There are other, I'm actually going to pull up pip list so you guys can see this. But whenever I make Flask projects, it's usually a little bit, I have a couple of other things to install. But the whole idea is of a microframework is to only install and include the bare minimum of what you need. So these are all third-party to the third-party application, kind of, sorta, of different things. So if you were running Django this would all be included in your single Django installation. But in Flask, because Flask is a micro framework, we only install what we need. So if I didn't need an admin portal, then I just don't install Flask admin. If I don't need multilingual, I don't install Flask Babel. Typically, when I do something, I really just need to install Flask cores. Cores is cross-origin requests, which means that you can limit who is allowed to make calls to you. Let's see. I use Flask Marshmallow, which is a, I don't, but Marshmallow allows you to take native object representations and convert them into JSON, which makes your job of exporting data incredibly easy. I typically use Flask RESTful to actually make RESTful APIs. But then you also, Flask SQL Alchemy. SQL Alchemy is a way that you can create and maintain SQL databases by making models that you create and design from Python classes. So I create a class that extends model, and I say ID is type int, and it has an ID field. It has a name field, which has a default value of not yet filled in, and all sorts of things like that. And then when you run SQL Alchemy database utilities, it will initialize the database. It will create the database design for you, and whenever you go in to update something in the code, I change name to first name, it then goes and changes it into the database without losing data. It's a really good tool. WTF? What the form? It's creating web forms. But again, so Flask is a micro framework. And this is all we need to actually get a hello world function. It's actually a little less involved than the other one, but I'll just go ahead and save that. And the utility that I was talking about earlier, this command line utility, is Flask. When you do pip install, it can also install command line utilities as depending on what the package needs. Flask is one of those applications. I'm going to go ahead and export into the my local environment. Flask app equals, and then the path. There we go. The path to my flask_app.py file, which is in the desktop. Here we go. It's looking for this app thing right here, so that when I do Flask run, it has now started up the Flask application. And if I go to this right here in my web browser, I get hello world. So we have the hello world of our very basic web framework. Okay, when would SQL Alchemy support NoSQL models? I don't think they will ever support NoSQL models because you don't. I don't think it ever will, because it's a different domain. If you're not familiar with NoSQL, NoSQL is also referred to sometimes as a document database. It really is just like a database filled with JSON objects, like JSON files. This JSON file that we created before, this is an entry in NoSQL. Some names, document DB is something in Azure. AWS has, well, I'm forgetting what AWS has. If someone remembers offhand, put it in the chat. Most people are familiar with with technology or a company called MongoDB. MongoDB is NoSQL, and one of the nice things about NoSQL is that you don't have columns. I can insert this into NoSQL and the exact same table, because they're not really tables, they're just namespaces. I can insert something that only contains name, or just doesn't contain anything at all. It doesn't have to have any similarity. The only thing with NoSQL is that it has to have, you have to know the key in order to go look something up. So it's actually almost like, if you think of this object as as an entire NoSQL database, I need to know name, and it will return Michael. Or, well, I guess I need to know name. I need to be looking for the key age. NoSQL is S3 is more like Dropbox. I think it begins with a D. This is kind of annoying me now. I'm gonna look. DynamoDB. That's what it's called. So on AWS, their version is called DynamoDB. That was racking my brain for a second because I used that for a year and a half with a client. Anyway, it really I don't think SQL Alchemy will ever support NoSQL because it's just a different technology. Yeah, and typically NoSQL is so the client libraries are so specific that you typically would just use either the AWS or the MongoDB or the Azure library directly to send data to and from their respective database. It's not as standardized as SQL connections are in Python. They just haven't been around as long. Let's see. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You got me. Yeah, they also use key value store, but the primary difference, at least in terms of S3 and DynamoDB, is how the data is being stored. Well, S3, you're storing things as documents, whereas DynamoDB, you're actually keeping the object representation as the original model. S3 you are still looking things up by key and value, but it's just a different use case. I still don't think that SQL Alchemy will ever support NoSQL, just because it would actually just be easier to create a completely separate library for NoSQL at that point. Just because SQL Alchemy is so big. But anyway, that's me speculating. Anyway, so we have our Flask application here, just like we had before, or like we saw in the bottle example. I'm actually going to change this just a little bit. So technically, we don't really have a root endpoint currently, but I can say, instead of hello world, I can do name, and have this be a formatted string. So if I go ahead and, where did I have this? Oh, I minimized it. And I'm actually going to go ahead and do export Flask debug. And what that will allow me to do is anytime that I go in and change my code, well, just going to do this for the sake of making it different. It will see that a file has changed and it reloads it, so we don't have to keep stopping it and starting it all the time. Now if we go back here, we changed it. There's no root technically right now, so the URL was not found. However, if we go ahead and supply a name, hello Michael. Easy as that. Now I'm gonna test something. I'm gonna see if I can do this because I haven't explicitly done this in a while. So we can double up on routes, like it's like this route and this name. Now I'm wondering if this name equals none thing will allow me to do this. Name equals world if name is none else name. That's just me doing a single liner for something that probably is just would look better on 2 lines, but whatever. I just want, let's see if this works. So if I still go, well, let's change the name. John, hello John. And then if I go back to my root, let's see what happens. Hello world. There we go. That worked as expected. So yeah, that's us doubling up on our routes here. Default value is that's just how it goes. So that's how we can handle multiple routes without having to completely duplicate things. Let me quickly show off another hello time. So if we go ahead and let's say that our route design is app.route. Let's say we're going to do times, and if we give this colon int, it's going to automatically parse the times variable here into an integer, so that we don't have to do that for us for ourselves. I'm just going to say, oh yeah, actually we could do that. So we can return, we're going to join, oh, let me type this out and explain it. Hello. Okay, so what this little line of code is going to do is we have created a list with one string in it, hello. And for as many times as we are given, it is going to multiply this string or this list with a single string in it. And when you multiply lists together, I think we'll have to double check this. It will just kind of add things onto it. And if that doesn't work, I can just do a line that has it appending. And then join will take whatever is in the resulting list and put new line characters between them. So let's see if this works. So if I go to, if I just give this an integer, because again, it's just looking for something that it knows is going to be an int. And this also, well, let's see if this collides there. Converter to, okay. Actually, I think I got this the other way around. Maybe it's this. Or maybe this isn't like that. Let's see. Let's try this first. There we go. That was going. Okay, so in these routes, the type actually goes first. So if I put that in, it's not going to do anything. Function annotations. So yeah, you'll notice what's kind of interesting. The default is actually just looking for a string. But if you give something at the same route that is looking for something specific, like an integer in this case, it will prefer that before looking for the more generic string type. Again, that's redundant. You can just put name. And so we can still do our name thing, hello Michael, and our root, just hello world, but then it will preference this. Oh, and well, it's HTML. HTML doesn't look for new line characters specifically, but it still said, we gave it 5. We have 5 hellos here. We give it 10. We'll get 10, so on and so forth. And let's actually, for proper API kind of things here, let's actually also, so from Flask, we can import Flask, and we can also import JSONify. So if instead we wanted to return, yeah, let's actually just overwrite this. So let's just say I have a data thing here that I'm going to return. Let's say I'm just going to have a static ID equals 1, and then we're actually just going to return, let's just say data, and we're going to, our data is going to be our hello, but in a list form. So we've created this payload that we want to return as JSON. Well, we very simply just return JSONify data, JSONify data, and if we go ahead and rerun this, look at this pre-formatted, organized JSON payload. And we just ensured that it was valid JSON, it was JSON compatible, and it did all of the formatting for us, and we get this lovely little API response. So, so there's Flask, getting some endpoints built, returning regular strings, and some data. If you are looking to use Flask to actually create web interfaces, there is a library called Jekyll that it uses, which is this parsing language. You'll see it used a lot. Let me actually pull it up. Python Jekyll. Yeah, so statics. No. Let's see, what am I looking for? Gotta have something. Quick start guide. Oh, no, not Jekyll. Sorry, I got confused. Yeah, I was gonna say Jekyll's Ruby. I don't know where the heck I got that from. Brain fart. The templating engine that it gets included in Flask, but also I believe is also available by default in Bottle and is included in Django, is called Jinja, specifically Jinja 2. Oh, and Vladimir, yes, I did in fact create the Meetup API using Flask. Let's see, just to show you guys, this is a project that I wrote 3 years ago and have been maintaining. It gets a revamp every once in a while as more people continue to use it. This aviation REST API. this is getting searched by served by Flask, and GitHub. Yeah, so if you actually go into here, you'll see that this is running Flask, and here's static views. Flask really isn't meant to do static things, but yeah, I was just being lazy. Here's some of the more interesting things where, API routing endpoints. So API report type and the station. That's what we used. API meet our KMCO we did before. It got sent into here. Yeah, R type stations. We get the options. Checks for any kind of errors. And then I have this generic catch-all, kind of report, handle report that I do in a separate folder or a separate file that does all the crazy formatting and just returns a dictionary, and then we format that dictionary based on the data format that the user requested. So if you want to check that out, it's available on my GitHub. Fly in Action 91. There's no G in there. And you can see a bunch of my other projects. But yeah, the API that we called from earlier is written on Flask. It's open source. You guys can go take a look at it. So back to Jinja. I'm sorry, Jekyll. That's a Ruby application. I don't know what the heck I was thinking. So Jinja. Yeah, so the templating engine is Jinja. And one of the nice things about Jinja is it allows you to embed Python code into your Jinja templates, into your HTML files. So if you just kind of ignore this, extends and block body, those are Jinja embedding things. But you can see for user in users, we're going to add a link item or a list item, unordered list item, user.url, user.username, and we get out the for loop. It's very powerful and very easy to use. There's here's documentation. There's tons of tutorials online. It's highly used. It's well supported, and you can actually use this as a standalone library if you just want to write anything using Jinja. But let's see. We're getting close to the end. I want to very quickly go over one last third-party library called Pandas. I couldn't I couldn't talk about third-party libraries without talking about Pandas. I don't have enough time to get more than surface deep. No time at all. But Pandas is one of the most widely used data science packages, or I keep forgetting, most data science packages in Python. Same thing. We're going to install Pandas. It's spelled just like the animal, so I'm going to update Pandas here. And it might take a little while. Pandas is, so Pandas is built primarily on top of NumPy. And if you want to describe Pandas to anyone, succinctly, like, imagine an Excel spreadsheet. That's Pandas. Except it's in code. It's built on top of NumPy, which is, if you're not familiar with NumPy, NumPy takes Python lists and makes them supercharged and incredibly fast to do a lot of operations. So let's go ahead and open Python, and I am almost, actually let me go ahead and clear it again. I am almost certainly going to have to look up my documentation on this because it has been a while. There's also Mako and Cheetah templating engines. I never remember those. I'm sorry, Vladimir. Yeah, there are so many Python packages. You can find 10, 100 packages that all do the same thing. Use them while working with CherryPy. I have not heard CherryPy. I will have to look that up after the stream. I just bring up Jinja 2 because it's the most widely used when you're specifically using the Python web frameworks and micro frameworks. But in any programming language, the best tool to use is the one that you know, or are at the very least are willing to learn, that you think will make your job the easiest. All right. We won't go there. All right. Again, okay, so let's get back in here. So we're going to import pandas. Now, if you've used R before, pandas is the Python version of a data frame. Which, again, you can just think of it, it's just tabular data. It's an Excel spreadsheet. But it allows you to do aggregate operations on that data. I'm actually going to look for a file on my computer for a second. You're going to get a little run through of my Dropbox here. Actually, there we go. It's already there. So I have these CSVs that have temperature and pressure data that I recorded from an Arduino during Hurricane Irma 2.5 weeks ago, and Matthew from last year. So I'm actually going to do Hurricane Irma. So let's go ahead. So we can do df data frame equals pandas.read CSV. Actually, no, before I do that, we're going to be a proper programmer. Import path as path, or import os.path as path, and we're going to do, we're first going to get, our file path as path.join, oh, no, cwd, I'm just going to import os. Wait, I'm on that. Okay, we're not going to be proper programmers. I'm going to cheat. Because I already have the absolute path for this. Anyway, we're going to do df equals pandas.read CSV, and I'm just going to tell it to go exactly where it needs to go. Users.mdu, mdpont, Dropbox, and it's Hurricane Irma .csv. I think that's all I need. Yes. So we've read in our CSV data, which CSV conveniently, as long as it's formatted properly, is already tabular. I can do df.head to get a look at my data. And you notice that one of the nice things with pandas is that whenever you print out data from it, it does automatic data print formatting, which is great. Oh, I think there's one other thing I need to do. I think it's header equals none, maybe. Let's see that. There we go. Okay, so all I did there was my CSV does not have column headers, what the name of the data, and so it interpreted the first line of data as the column title. So all I did with header equals none is said there's no header, just go ahead and start reading the data from line 1. And head just prints out the first the first n number of lines. It defaults to 5, but if we want to read the first 10, here's the first 10 rows of data in our CSV. So let's see. Well, normally, if we have actual header information, you can actually do columns like that. I'm wondering. I think it just goes. No, maybe it's just that. There we go. Yeah. Okay. So then instead of giving it a the name, I just gave it the index. So let's go ahead and print out my head again. So if I do my data frame and if I want to get the first column of information, which here is my temperature in Celsius, I can I can ask what the mean value is, and the mean temperature that in my house during Hurricane Irma was 22.8287 degrees Celsius. And I believe it's just standard dev. No. Oh, by the way, it's a series. Let's actually use dir to figure out what our standard deviation function is, because it's been a little while. It's almost certainly going to start with an S. Just std. So just kind of pull that up again. So just get rid of the EV here. So the standard deviation of temperatures is about 0.5. Now, what's something else we can do? I think it's just max and min. And so column 1 here is actually looking at the pressure in millibars of the hurricane as it passed through. So so there's our max value, and I can do what the minimum value is. So this was the minimum millibar. Yeah, this is the lowest pressure that I recorded at the house during the hurricane. Now, for comparison, if I actually go in here and I'm going to go ahead and do Hurricane Matthew.csv, and I'm going, instead of putting this in df, I'm actually going to do just mat. And if I run the same thing, if I want to, I'll run the same thing on mat, and the lowest recorded pressure during Hurricane Matthew, which was further away and a weaker storm than Hurricane Irma, was about 1,500 millibars higher than Hurricane Irma was. And so, if you're wondering, we're doing some data science. Woohoo! Let's see. So we read data in from a CSV. We did a little bit of aggregation, or some column statistics on it. So we read in a CSV. Let's export as an Excel spreadsheet. Now let's say let's see if I can remember this offhand. It's data.df.write XLSX, I think. And we're going to open Irma.xls. Oh, that's what was confusing me. I got my S and my L confused. Excel spreadsheet X, because that's what Microsoft decide to do. And we're going to be, I believe it's write binary for this. We'll see. Right, XLS. Okay, so let's go ahead and use our dir on our data frame. and we're gonna actually go ahead and mute these. Oh, it actually, well, actually, I believe it's actually pandas.write, and then the first thing we give it would be df, and then the second would be the file object. Oh, and in case you ever see it, typically when people are using pandas, they'll actually import pandas as PD. So you import pandas as PD. So if you see this, that's more often when you're looking at data science notebooks and programs, you'll see that. So let's see if that works. No, it does not. Let's do your pandas. Oh, 2. It's not right. It's well. No. Okay. Okay. No, it is up here. I was just looking for the wrong thing. 2. Okay. So 2XL. Da 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 da. So not right XLSX. It's just 2XL. Well, let's look up some documentation. We're just we're getting a little over time, but let's get some closure on this. Let's see something cool. So, pandas, data frame, write, Excel. To Excel. Excel writer, right. I haven't used Excel in so long, but let's so yeah, let's go ahead and use this. Oh, and here's that PD I mentioned earlier. So we're gonna say writer equals pandas dot Excel writer. And here's where we're going to have our irma.xlsx. Yes, correct. And now we're going to, instead of calling open, we're going to have our writer because that's taking care of our file object. And let's see if we even need to give it a sheet name. Nope, so it wrote it out. And then, yes, and then we need to do writer.save. Now, if we go here, there's our Excel spreadsheet. And if we open it into Excel, there is our data. And there are ways to get, say I want you to write it without the row numbers and the header information, but we took information from a CSV, we read it into pandas, we looked at some statistics about it, and then we wrote it over into an Excel spreadsheet. It's pretty cool. There's one last little library. I'm not going to demo it, but I want to show it to you guys because I just think it's so cool, and it actually relates directly to pandas. And while I'm so it's Panda SQL, and it's by Yhat. If anyone in the data science world knows about Yhat, he's amazing. But what Panda SQL allows us to do is, here we go. Panda SQL allows us to write SQL queries to query data in pandas data frames. And it does this by treating each pandas data frame variable name as the table in the SQL query. It's so cool. You can do joins. You can join two tables together. Anything that you can do in SQL, in standard SQL, you can just read data in, treat them as tables, and query like that. It's a great way of trying to test out some SQL queries if you don't even want to create a database, or even if you don't want to create an SQLite database on your machine, or if you just are really comfortable with SQL and you have to work with this pandas thing that your coworker told you to use. But I love showing this off. It's just so cool. And I just really have no good excuse to use it either, but I just think it's so cool. Another nice thing about pandas is that you can use pandas to feed data into machine learning models. Pandas has great support if you're doing any kind of tabularized data statistics. You will definitely be using pandas, and if you're not, definitely start using pandas. It just makes things really easy. So we're 11 minutes over. We started a little bit. We let people get onto the live stream, but that's it. So we went over a couple libraries in the standard library that comes with every Python installation. And then went over a couple of how to install third-party libraries, and then went over a couple of third-party libraries from a bunch of different areas in the programming world. Command line utilities, requesting data from the web, making data available to the web by creating a website, and then working with local data and working with it with pandas. All of the libraries that I showed, all of the third-party libraries that I gave little skims on in this session, we have either previous video talk recordings that go further into one of these libraries. Like, we did a 2-part series where we as a group created a Flask application using with SQL Alchemy. I'm forgetting exactly what it's called, but I think the first one was back in March, and then we had another one either the month later. It was sometime earlier this year. If you go to github.com/OrlandoPython, we have code repositories for past projects and speaker presentations. I know we have begins in there somewhere. We almost certainly have something that involves pandas. And I definitely gave a I think one of the first presentations I ever gave at Python was on using the request library. So that's in there somewhere to go a little bit further. And again, you can always just open up a Python interpreter and just start playing around with like hacking with these libraries and reading the documentation. Python is really good about having clear documentation. It's one of the reasons why I just keep coming back to the language. It's just one of the many reasons. Yeah, so I'm going to keep the live stream up for a little bit if you guys have any more questions to ask. And you can always reach me through the Orlando Developers Slack, or reach out to me on Meetup. Comment in any of our previous YouTube streams. Reiterating some housekeeping, next month Orlando Python, and also most likely when we have our next MLDS, Orlando Machine Learning and Data Science meetup. Both of those are going to be at the Melrose Center in downtown Orlando at the public library. Orlando Python coming up in a week and a half, October 7th. Vladimir and Francisco, go ahead and email us at orlando.mlds@gmail.com to get your free PyCon ticket, and the first 10 people to use the discount code that we put in the live chat will get 50% off of the ticket price to Orlando Python, so use that before it's gone. Anything else? Again, so sorry to see the Iron Yard go. They were really good to us, and the Iron Yard is has been so good to us, and will still be good to us until the day that they close. Because even though they're closing and they're no longer hosting meetups, they're still letting us use their space for Florida PyCon, because Florida PyCon is exactly 1 week before they shut their doors. Thank you everyone at the Iron Yard for the last 2-3 years. They've been amazing. I'll keep it. I'll stay online just for a little bit for any questions, but the Python beginner series is finally over after 2 months and a day. Right. Hope everyone enjoyed themselves. This is the first time that we've actually just done a live stream just by itself, at my house. And yeah, this seemed to go pretty well. I'll know that we can do this in the future. But yeah, I really like just actually meeting everyone when we're in a physical space. I can't wait to see you guys next month, or better yet, at PyCon. So now can be awkward silence as I wait for people to post their questions and or leave the live chat. Actually, I think I can just put up a static image. Make it look professional, except for the fact that I'm still talking. It was going to look professional until he realized that the static image is not actually centered, because OBS does not actually remember the proper dimensions when you are when you're going back and forth between a projector and your computer. Now it looks better.